Hey there, friends. He's Chris Murray. I'm Mike Stephenson. We're kicking it casual here in our Nevada Sportsnet studio, but talking about something very important and potentially enormous for our town. Of course, it was September of 2023 when we learned, Chris, that a potential $1 billion private revitalization of the Grand Sierra Resort would happen, including a brand new arena that would house Nevada men's basketball. Outside of those involved in this project, I think our Chris Murray is the most well-versed on what has happened since that announcement. So we have identified 9 different topics or 9 different subjects, if you will, to kind of track what's happened, what could happen, some of the opposition, and all of that. So we are sitting here on Thursday, April 3rd. There has recently been a big meeting. There is another big meeting to come. We're going to cover it all. But Chris, let's just begin going back to September 2023. It was an enormous announcement, $1 billion private investment into the Grand Sierra Resort. What all was announced?
Well, it was cool. It's the first time I actually had been in the Lex, and I didn't fall in the pool, so that was nice. But yeah, I mean, the movers and shakers in that meeting told you something really important was about to happen. So as you mentioned, $1 billion that included an arena for Nevada men's basketball and obviously other events, 10,000 capacity. There was a Topgolf-like 2-story aqua range where the current lake property is, right on the south part of the GSR. There was affordable housing, 300 units. There was potentially a new 500 wing room hotel that was going to be put in as well. Restaurant, retail, potentially a community ice rink, which is now part of the plans, parking structure. So basically just a complete reformation of GSR, which is a great property in northern Nevada. But I think a lot of the focus went to that basketball/hockey arena because what it could mean for Nevada men's basketball, which was going to be one of the primary tenants in that facility.
And of course, within our 9 subjects, I'm going to have plenty of follow-up questions. So you mentioned men's basketball. Everybody showed face at this thing. Alex Morello, of course, the owner of the GSR. President Brian Sandoval was there from the university. Stephanie Remp, head coach Steve Alford. So we saw everybody there, and we thought this thing is probably going to happen. And of course, like you said, the opportunity for Nevada men's basketball, that would just put them on the map nationwide, this arena.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a huge development because Lawler Event Center, getting very old. It was built in 1983, so you're talking about 40 years since that building had been built, to be able to move not only into a state-of-the-art facility, but a facility that would have suites, that would have premium seating, so Nevada could do a better job of maximizing its revenue, which there are not premium seating areas at Lawler Event Center. It is at Mackey, and those are all sold out. So there's a clamoring for these premium seats, and being able to kind of tap into that in terms of being able to create more revenue and what has been the premier sport on campus, men's basketball, under Steve Alford at the time, which they were heading to a couple of NCAA tournaments. I think that's why there was an initial huge swelling of not only positivity, but momentum that this project would be huge, not only for Reno as a town, but if you're a Wolfpack Athletics fan, for the Nevada Athletic Department.
Before we move on to our second subject, one of the early quick feedback was moving the team off campus. Yes. How is Nevada and the Wolfpack going to handle that? And they had a quick answer for that.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of critiques. One was, why wasn't the women's basketball team going to play there? And we can maybe answer that down the road in this thing. But the thought was there would be busing from campus out to the GSR. The Wolfpack and UNR would put together a plan to try and get as many students as possible from the campus location out to the home games, because we all know a home atmosphere is built first and foremost by those students. And when Lawler is really rocking, you're talking about 1,500, 2,000 students in that building setting that atmosphere. Are you going to be able to do that if you move your team from an on-campus facility to an off-campus facility? So that's been the big selling point from Nevada, is we'll find a way to get the students out there for free to make sure that they are enjoying the game and they are setting that atmosphere.
Of course, a lot of folks thinking it's all private, they're like, that's cool. Alex Morello, come in and take care of us, as we move to sort of our second subject. Well, he's had some headlines since then. What have been just the developments in his realm and the project overall, I guess?
So this was one of 2 major projects. Mr. Morello, who owns the GSR at the time, owned the Arizona Coyotes, also owns the Tucson Roadrunners. That's an AHL AAA team. And he had that Coyotes franchise, which was under a lot of tumult because they didn't have a home arena to play in. They were playing at Arizona State's facility, and he was trying to build closer to a $2 billion entertainment district in the north part of Phoenix for that NHL team. So I thought when this thing was announced, okay, you've got 2 priorities here. One's an NHL team, and one is either an AHL team / college team. Obviously, your priority is going to be on taking care of that AHL team or the NHL team and try and put that money toward that entertainment district in a much bigger market that is Phoenix. So I personally had a little bit of, okay, well, are both of these going to happen? If only one can happen, obviously the Coyotes are going to get the priority there. things did not play out well in the coming months. Essentially, he was kind of forced to sell that property, the Coyotes, back to the NHL, which then sold it to the Utah Jazz owner. So now you have the Utah Hockey Club. Alex Morello did retain the ability to restart an expansion franchise in Phoenix if he was able to build an NHL quality facility. Unfortunately for him, the land auction where that property was going to be built was pulled at the last second. So he was not able to build that property, and he has since shuttered hope at having an expansion franchise with the Phoenix Coyotes. So all of his eggs are now in the basket of Reno. So while it wasn't a great development maybe for him or for NHL and Phoenix, I think it was kind of a shot in the arm for this project, because now it went from maybe the second priority to the first priority. Plus he got $1 billion from the NHL to sell the Coyotes back to the league, and now that $1 billion can be used to help try and build this property here in Reno.
With that said, still a lot of hurdles to get to that point as we move to sort of our third subject, which is the funding behind this. And I think everybody got wide-eyed when it was $1 billion private funding, completely private. Well, it's not so completely private now. They're trying to get some TIF funding. Why don't you explain all of that?
Well, that's the confusing part, and I think some people might feel that there was a bait and switch there, because the impression that we got, not only those in the community but the media, is that this would be completely privately financed. And why did we get that impression? When Alex Morello took the stage at the introductory press conference, he said no university money would be spent on this arena. That's not no public money. It is different, but maybe you make a leap. But then you and our president, Brian Sandoval, the former governor, got up there and said no public money will be used on this arena. And then he kind of pointed to Alex Morello and said, that's what Alex said.
You got us, right?
So everyone's going forward with the thought that $1 billion in private investment, everybody's fully on board with that. I mean, to be able to make that investment and not dip into public money is a huge, huge win for the city of Reno. Mayor Hillary Sheevy was up there talking about this great project as well. The only person who said no public money was Brian Sandoval. You fast forward 13 months later, and then they're going basically in front of the city council asking for this TIF funding, and everybody was very confused by that. We did reach out to the GSR. They said that Brian Sandoval had misspoke. He should have said no university money, but I think there were plenty of points along those 13 months where that clarification could have been given.
Right.
So I think people were maybe a little bit rubbed wrong in terms of that, feeling like maybe something was promised, now something else is being asked for. But what is TIF funding? It is tax increment financing, where basically future property sales increase. So if, let's say the GSR has a property tax bill of $10 million, they build this, it goes up to $15 million. They would ask for that that extra $5 million part, not the original 10, to be abated from the property tax. And eventually that would add up to about $90 million over the next 30 years. So that is what it's requesting, is that the future increase in property tax be abated, not be put on the GSR's back. TIF funding is a pretty regular thing in the city of Reno. I mean, Greater Nevada Field has used it. The Wingfield Park area downtown has used it. The old movie theater downtown, which no longer exists, has used it. So a lot of people have tapped into this. The one caveat, it's supposed to be used in a blighted area.
Right.
And you look at Greater Nevada Field, formerly Aces Ballpark, that was a very blighted area. And they tapped into that TIF funding to try and improve that area so you'd get more traffic into the downtown region there. You look at the Reno Event Center, that's used some public money. You look at the bowling stadium, that's used some public money as well. So there's been a lot of projects mostly downtown with that TIF funding, but that is what the GSR is asking, is for $90 million, up to $90 million. It's pay as you go, so if you only build half of it and the property tax value only goes up $45 million, you only get $45 million to that. If you build nothing, you get nothing. So there's not a huge risk from the city of Reno's perspective.
But blighted area, people think GSR blighted area, does that qualify?
Yeah, that's one of the big oppositions, as we're going to talk about, is that there's been a coalition of other resorts in northern Nevada who are saying this does not, by the law, the legal language, qualify because the GSR is not a blighted area. So you've had the Row hotels, El Dorado, Silver Legacy, Circus Circus, you've had the Nugget, you've had the Peppermill, you've had the Bonanza, all send multiple letters to the city council saying that they do not believe that the GSR projects qualifies for TIF funding because of the letter of the law. Now it is within a redevelopment area. So redevelopment area 1 is downtown. There was later redevelopment area 2 that was added, and the GSR does sit within that footprint. So it qualifies in terms of that, but does it qualify as being a blighted area? And that's the big level of concern. Now, I would say those casinos probably have a vested interest as well. If you're the Nugget and you have an 8,000, 9,000 outdoor amphitheater, and you have this GSR open and they're going to try and host concerts, well, now you have competition there. If you're the Row and games are at Lawler Event Center, either out-of-towners maybe stay downtown and then walk to the game, or after the game, Wolfpack fans walk downtown and enjoy a big win or something like that, you're getting more feet through the casino. So is it completely altruistic? I mean, you look at the Peppermill, not a lot of competition there. They're a non-downtown. They don't really host a ton of major concerts kind of situation.
Sort of just latching on.
Yeah, talking with a couple of people, their concern is this is setting a principle, and it's bad policy because it's not a blighted area. So that will be an interesting battle. You're going to have the GSR, one of the best resorts in town, versus kind of all the other resorts minus the Atlantis, kind of debating whether this public money is legal.
So I did jump ahead there with the opposition, as Chris greatly explained there. But going back to the TIF funding, on the whole, it might not be such a big ask, especially when you look at some of the other projects that have taken place in the state of Nevada, most notably arenas. Of course, a lot of those in southern Nevada.
Yeah.
But when you look at GSR, what they're looking for public funding, it doesn't compare to what the public funding has been down south.
Well, yeah, and this is a presentation done by Hunden. That's a third party that was hired by the city of Reno to do an analysis of whether this is a worthwhile venture, whether it will raise the sales tax revenue that would make the abatement of the property tax worthwhile. And they didn't look at all of these other Nevada facilities. You look at Allegiant Stadium, home of the Raiders, 41% public financing. You look at the future A Stadium, 25% public financing. You look at Lee's Family Forum, that's an AHL arena down there in Henderson, very similar to what this building would be. This is a much more, I think this is a nicer facility, but similar. 50% public financing. You look at Greater Nevada Field in Reno, that had some public financing. You look at the Tahoe Blue Event Center up in State Line, that had public financing. Really the only major facility in the state of Nevada over the last like 15, 20 years, privately financed, was T-Mobile, the home of the Vegas Golden Knights. You look at Lawler Event Center, where Nevada plays now, 100% public financing from slot tax revenue. So the majority of these, you're looking at least 25% subsidized. If this all comes to play out for the GSR property, and it is $1 billion, and they get that $90 million in property tax abatement, that's just 9%. So I think it's a good deal for the city if you look at previous stadiums built in the state of Nevada. I think the concern is a lot of people had the thought, because that was the initial impression, that there wasn't going to be any public money, and now public money is being asked for. So I don't think the ask is outrageous. I just think the way that it went about, I think maybe a little bit misleading for some people, and that's why they're trying to pump the brakes, combined with the fact that they're going after TIF funding, which is kind of for taking really bad areas of town and making them better. The GSR is not a bad area of town. One of the concerns that the coalition of those resorts raised is there's a requirement that you have to pass that says, if not for this money, you cannot build this facility. You don't have the financial means to do so. The GSR, not in that position, because this money would not go to the construction costs. It would kind of come on the back end after they built it. So they're arguing, no, Alex Morello has the money to build this. It's just he wants a kickback at the back end. And the GSR is saying, well, it doesn't pencil out financially. If we don't get public support, we're essentially not going to build this thing.
Well, actually, you want the public and you want the town to sort of be a partner with you. But like you said and kind of alluded to it, they probably stood up there that September day and knew we're going to be asking for TIF funding eventually. And that university money was an important distinction. As you mentioned, Brian Sandoval kind of misspeaking, saying public, when really they said it was going to be private, but probably deep down knew we're going to end up asking.
And it's worth pointing out, Alex Morello, Brian Sandoval were not made available to the media after that press conference. We could only take the words that they said during their speeches. So we couldn't go to them and be like, yeah, no public money, right? That was not an option that we were given as the media during that meeting. Hillary Sheevy, the mayor of Reno, did talk with the Nevada Independent website and said that the initial meetings in terms of the funding with the GSR were, quote unquote, very vague. So a little bit surprising that she would get up there and kind of trumpet the meeting, because she is going to be one of the people voting on whether this TIF funding is approved. So the Reno Redevelopment Agency votes on this. That is comprised of everybody of the Reno City Council, of which Hillary Sheevy, as the mayor, gets a vote on that. So that's a little bit iffy for me to go up there and talk about how great of a project is when you don't know how it's going to be funded, and now ultimately you are one being asked to vet it and voting on whether it's the best use of public money.
There's still a chance there's a lot of egg on a lot of faces, but we'll get to that a little bit later. More on the opposition. If you're the Row, if you're some of these other casinos, is it specifically the TIF funding, or is that what they're focusing on? Would they be okay with it happening if it was completely private?
Yeah, and that's what they've said. I mean, speaking with somebody who's part of that coalition, they said that they sent a letter to Alex Morello as soon as he announced it, saying this is going to be great for Reno, this is a great project, and we're completely behind it. They didn't know at the time that this TIF funding would be requested, and we don't know if the GSR knew deep down whether that TIF funding was going to be requested. So The language and messaging from that group is that they would be 100% for this project if it was privately funded. The public element of it is what makes them a little bit leery.
Well, and there's also an angle here that the Row, Caesars Entertainment, and some of these other entities here in town, they support some of these Reno City Council members, do they not? So that's going to end up being a
And the GSR has
topic down the
made
road.
contributions to
GSR
these
as well, of
Reno
course.
City Council members as well. So, everybody gets a little bit of grease in that pocket to vote a certain way.
Man.
Now, who knows if I've never been in that seat.
Right.
I don't know exactly how that plays out if you're on the Reno City Council, but definitely there are donations going to some of these council members from both sides of that. And it'll be interesting to see how those council members kind of navigate this. Now, I think just in general, the more you vet a major, this is a $1 billion project with maybe $90 million in public money. The city of Reno has a $25 million deficit because of lower sales tax. Now, there's the argument that if you create this arena, you're going to increase sales tax so you can help fill that gap. And then there's the argument that, no, you're just displacing the sales tax. All the money that was being used at Lawler is now just going to be used at the GSR. You're not actually building sales tax, you're just moving it around. Or people who may have not gone to a game at Lawler but will go to a game at the GSR, instead of going to a movie or doing something else with their money, they're just moving it to the GSR. So how much will that sales tax base increase? That's why these studies are being done. I think the coalition's letter is at least leading to more vetting of this project, and I think that's a very positive thing. I think it's already been vetted to a pretty decent degree. The more you can look into it and try and figure out whether this is the right deal for the city, I think the better.
Anything else you want to hit on the opposition to this at that point?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think we've covered it pretty well as, there are two sides to this for sure and a lot of business decisions to be made. But as you pointed out, a new arena, this type of arena with what is proposed, could bring a lot of events that don't normally take place in Reno. So maybe we do see that revenue and that tax rise. So what other, obviously men's basketball wouldn't be the primary home team of this arena likely.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people got that impression.
Right.
You're not building a $380 million arena to host 15 to 17 Nevada men's basketball games a year. So that's where that AHL team that Alex Morello owns in Tucson comes into play. If he did not own that team, or there was not a lease to try and get an AHL minor league hockey team into that arena, this arena would not be being
And their
built.
lease, by the way, in Tucson is about to expire
Yes.
with the timeline of this project.
So according to that Hyundai Partners presentation that was given to the Development Agency Board, they're projecting 39 hockey games, 17 basketball games, 5 major concerts, 7 minor concerts, 6 family shows, 6 other sporting events, and 15 rentals. I think it's $35,000 to rent this building was the proposal. So if you got an extra $35,000 around, you can have a really nice birthday party. That is 95 total events in a 365-day calendar. So yes, if it was just Nevada men's basketball, this thing wouldn't be being built. I think that hockey element, which is not official in any means, is a very big piece to this. And adding minor league hockey to Reno would be something that a lot of people in town have asked for. We have not seen that since the late 1990s with the Reno Rage / Renegades. So I think that'd be additional entertainment opportunities. So you're talking about annually about 95 events, maybe NCAA tournament games in the future. Now it's 10,000 capacity, so that hits the NCAA minimum threshold. If you look at the 8 hosts for the first round regional, only one of those was below 15,000. So I think it might be a little bit light for the NCAA tournament, but Reno does have all these hotel rooms, which is a big part of getting an NCAA tournament bid. And there are some NCAA regionals that have come into town, cross country. Last year, Nevada Men's Golf is hosting an NCAA regional out at Montreux coming up here. So that would definitely be a push to try and get NCAA tournament games to Northern Nevada too.
And if it was an NCAA tournament, you could still host like a holiday tournament and maybe have a few college teams come to town, or maybe a secondary postseason tournament, conference tournaments.
Big
So
Sky,
there's a lot of
Big
opportunity
West.
there. And so with how they're trying to pack the schedule at this new proposed arena, that's how Nevada women's basketball ends up on the outside looking in. But in that same breath, they get to make Lawler their own as well.
Yeah, that was the big concern, is how do you do a minor league hockey season, men's basketball season, and women's basketball season, which all overlap, all in the same time frame. So I think that's why the women's basketball team got squeezed out. I know that has upset some Wolfpack women's basketball fans, but that does give the university an opportunity to completely rebrand that as just a women's basketball arena. It's not completely unique. You look at UNLV, they play their men's basketball games at Thomas and Mack, their women's basketball games at Cox Pavilion. So there is a precedent out there, and if there's a really big women's basketball game, maybe against the UNLV, or you bring in a top 25 school, maybe you have an opportunity of playing the game there maybe once a year.
Of course, course, we saw the Nevada women this last year play at the Tahoe Blue Event Center up in Tahoe, so that doesn't seem far-fetched to have a game or two take place in this new arena, which, again, the arena, $380 million, has now become the narrow focus for Phase 1. But, of course, this started as a $1 billion investment or project with a whole lot of other bells and whistles. So as we move on now to what else could come to Phase 2 and 3, we don't really know timelines on all that, but this could be really a one-of-a-kind area if everything comes to fruition, which seems like a huge ask, but it might be possible.
Yeah, so Phase 1, we've talked about, it's the arena. It's the community ice facility that'd be right next to it, attached, about 500 seats. It's basically a practice facility for the AHL team, and then they'll play their games in there. But you would have a lot of community hours, local teams, or just a free skate, and then an 8-story parking garage, almost 3,000 spots. So that is Phase 1. That is on the north part, over where that swing and the go-karts are. It was going to be in the south part. They did some soil testing, wasn't good there, so that's why they're moving it to the north. In terms of the south, and I think people might be more excited for this, is the multi-deck aqua range, kind of like Topgolf, but not Topgolf because they've got their own branding.
Its own brand, yeah.
And beautifying that lake area, which I think the lake is fine, but it's not a place that you're going to go to on a Friday night unless you're playing, aqua golf.
Right.
So you're talking about retail, you're talking about restaurants that face that area right on the north part of that lake. You're talking about the Topgolf, that would be on the west side, and you'd be hitting toward the east. You're talking about maybe daily, nightly light shows with the water fountain, kind of like Bellagio Light. That's kind of the vision for that area. So that would kind of be Phase 2. Phase 3 would be affordable housing, 300 homes that would first go to GSR employees. And then that wing, a 500-room wing, completely new to the facility. That one's probably the most far-fetched. The Hunden Partners analysis, that was the only one where they said we wouldn't necessarily say approve this one. Everything else they were fine with. So those are kind of some of the other main elements. We love going to Topgolf. My family, we got to go all the way over to Roseville to do that. So being able to do that in Reno, I think would be a big deal. But based on the current timeline, that's probably not anywhere in the near future. You're probably looking 2028-ish, maybe at the earliest.
Okay, they dropped that fun sizzle reel that had all the great renderings and all the cool shots. And going back to the other events they want to host, I think on the screen they had a Taylor Swift concert maybe taking place. And that seems like a stretch.
She's going to have to fall quite a bit to play 10,000. Like, that's nothing against the GSR Arena.
Shout out to them for putting her in there, though.
She's playing like 50,000 plus, Allegiant size stadiums, as opposed to maybe 10,000 plus.
All right, so let's jump into now what is next. And I guess before that, just yesterday, a big meeting took place. It was a marathon meeting, but a big part of that was a next step. So what happened just yesterday, Wednesday, April 2nd?
Yeah, so the Reno City Planning Commission met. Andrew Diss, who's kind of oversaw this whole thing, put a lot of work into it.
He's been here. Yep.
Yeah, he's kind of overseeing the project. He spoke. Stephanie Remp, the Nevada Athletic Director, spoke. There was a traffic engineer who spoke because traffic is a major concern as well. I mean, you're talking about a lot of people pouring into that area, and that kind of freeway area was just redone. So you're not going to like redo that whole Mill Street area. And then they had somebody from the city also give a presentation. So they did get unanimous approval to get a tentative planning use permit. And that allows you to pull permits to start construction. So that's the thing I've heard from a lot of people.
Permit for a permit, basically. Right?
Yeah, so there a lot of people like, this is never happening. They haven't actually filed permits, because I know, because I'm behind the scenes. So this is what had to require, what had to be happen for them to actually file for permits to start construction. So that was a major step to be able to get to the point where now they can ask for permits and maybe start construction here in the near future. So unanimous approval. There were a couple of public comments that weren't in favor of it. One of them said you should use this money to build an amusement park in Fernley. That's probably not happening.
That's quite an idea.
And the other one was questioning why there'd be public money used on this facility. If we pay for something, we got to pay our tax. If you're building something, you should pay your tax. I would say the 6-person panel, they were all very, very positive. They were like over the moon, very effusive in their praise of the project. Again, the biggest concern being traffic in the north part of that GSR area.
Amusement park in Fernley. I feel like you advance a few years, we're going to end up being built all the way out to Fernley the way things are trending here in our region.
Yeah, there was no response. There was no rebuttal to that one. She was having some issues with her. She zoomed in.
Okay.
There was quite an echo. She was having some pretty big issues.
Shout out to her for being involved, though.
With the technology. But yeah, she put on the record that she'd like an amusement park in Fernley because she doesn't want to have to go to Florida or California to be able to enjoy Disneyland.
Okay. So now next Wednesday, enormous meeting. It's part of why we're sitting down here to kind of set the table for what takes place next Wednesday.
Yeah, so the City Council, which is the Reno Redevelopment Committee agency, the same thing, the GSR will go in front of it and kind of do the last full presentation. And the university, I expect Brian Sandoval to be there, Stephanie Remp to be there, Alex Morello will probably be there, and he's a pretty private guy. He doesn't speak at a lot of these things. They will give a presentation to the City Council. I don't expect there to be a vote, because I don't think the opposition group is going to be there, but this is kind of like that next step, because they want to break ground here maybe at the end of May. So steps are being put in place, and it's probably like the third or fourth time they've got in front of the City Council and the redevelopment committee, and we'll see what kind of response they get. I think everyone's fully on board except for that public money part. I think that's the big part. And like we said, 9% of a project is very small compared to what we've seen nationally and within the state of Nevada. It's just, I don't think there was a feeling public money was going to be asked for.
It was
and now
how it came about.
And is it technically legal? Because if you look at the bylaws, it says blighted area. Now you could argue, okay, that whole area in the Reno redevelopment section 2, you drew the map there, so you considered it blighted at some point. I think that's going to be the big answer that the GSR, Andrew Diss and his group is going to have. If I'm on the City Council, I would ask, why do you consider this to be a blighted area that should be in consideration for TIF funding? And I think the answer to that question is going to be very important.
But you were saying, you did touch on it, but I want to just make sure we're locked in on the detail here. Technically, it was part of a redevelopment area. So is it technically a blighted area, or is this a subjective thing?
I think they basically draw a big map. And then my understanding would be, okay, you got to pick areas within that map that are blighted to be able to qualify. I don't think everywhere within that map, because the original redevelopment area was downtown. So there are areas in downtown that you can't really argue University of Nevada is a blighted area. Like, would UNR go and say, hey, they're building a $150 million business building. They didn't go ask for TIF money, although a lot of that is public money that is used to build that university. So I think that's going to be the last big hurdle to cross for this thing to be able to break ground, because I don't think it's breaking ground if that TIF money is not offered.
And there was initially talk of breaking ground this spring. We'll have to see what happens as we wrap things up with your prediction. What is going to happen in the next months and years to come with this project? Does it end up happening?
I think it will happen. I think they'll get approval. I think they've done a really good PR job of getting Nevada and Wolfpack men's basketball. That's the one big passion point in this community from a sports standpoint, involved from the very start. And now you've sold Wolfpack fans that we're going to give you this great $380 million, $400 million arena to pair with your new $12 million locker room, to pair with your new practice facility, to pair with some NIL money from the GSR to build this top 25 caliber men's basketball team. You've got Steve Alford on a major contract as well. It seems like you have the right personnel in terms of the coach to be able to elevate that. And I think getting those guys involved from the very start and getting an engaged Wolfpack fan base behind this project was ingenious, even if the ultimate reason this thing's being built is for a minor league hockey team that the GSR owner also owns. So I think they've done a really good PR job. I do think that the ask from a private money standpoint or public money standpoint is not outlandish. Yeah. And I think that the relationship with the City Council is at the point where it probably will be voted upon in a positive manner. It probably will break ground, if not late this spring, early this summer. And then the plan is for it to be open in 2027 for the fall. So you'll probably have a couple events in there before the Nevada men's basketball 27-28 season. So you're still a couple years away. That timeline has been pushed back a little bit. But I do think that they'll get the votes to be able to get the public money. And I do think, at the very minimum, the arena will be built. Now, will all the other stuff get done? I'm just kind of hoping for the golf facility. That's the thing I'm most personally excited for. I would guess not everything that we discussed is going to be done $1 billion, because you see rising costs of everything. Some of these tariffs, which have been mentioned, is making things more expensive to be built as well. But that arena is priority number one. I think that there are enough people in this community that want that built, that there will be pressure on the City Council to approve that public tax money, that abatement essentially, and that they'll move forward, and this thing will actually be a reality in a couple of years.
Tell you what, you heard it from Chris Murray. This thing is happening. As we mentioned, though, they're not all showing face back in September of 23 if it's not realistic, because that's a bad look if it doesn't come to fruition. So still hurdles to be jumped over, if you will, before shovels are in the ground, but hopefully that covered the nuts and bolts of everything going on. Any final notes before we wrap a bow on this?
No, I mean, that's the question I get most when I'm out, like coaching Little League or whatnot. It's about GSR and why is Nevada Nevada men's basketball losing all his players. So they're kind of tied together, right?
This could help,
Yeah, this could help retain those guys with additional NIL. So hopefully we covered it all. If not, let us know. Our job is to try and inform you guys as best as possible. And this is a very complicated subject, which is now 20 months in the making. So there's been a lot of developments over the last couple of months, but things are coming to an head. Important meetings are being held, and we'll see if we get there to late May, early June, whether there are shovels being put into the ground out there at the GSR. I know that'd be a big moment for everybody who's been behind this project, but I do think it's important to vet whether this project does deserve that public money that's being requested.
So all eyes on the meeting next Wednesday, of course. The team here at Nevada Sportsnet, led by Chris Murray's reporting, will have you covered on air and online. We hope that was a worthwhile listen, friends. Apologies for a couple mic hiccups here and there as we battle technology on a day-to-day basis here in this business. Shout out to Chris Murray. I'm Mike Stephenson. We'll see you around.